So I think what we learned is for complex questions, there are no simple solutions, and particularly not if we speak about transformative processes and policies. We learned, particularly from Yves and some others, that there are multiple drivers that we have to consider: land use change, climate, but also trade and policy conventions that we need to consider if we want to manage things better. I think particularly from the philosophers, and that was a unique opportunity to make biology or biodiversity researchers to meet with philosophers and policy scientists. We learned a lot about normative conflicts and the questions how people at different scales, and this means intra and intergenerational, have to find consensuses how to develop further. We saw from the presentation of Enrique Pereira, for instance, and also from some others, that we often try to optimize too much some ecosystem services on the dispensers of other services, and we have to pay for that in the future. The question is, of course, how can we get people in? And I think one aspect that came particularly from Marcus Duval is that question of value systems that address people. And we heard also we need visions for the future. I sometimes wonder, since I'm living in a rural area, how to get people on board that do not speak the language of scientists. Yeah, I think there we have a lot of need still to discuss how we can make them accepting science and being part of science. This is not so easy, maybe compared with an urban population that has very often a much better educational background. In the rural areas, it's sometimes a little bit simplistic. To summarize a little bit up for the whole conference, first, I want to thank warmly all the speakers and those attending the conference, to contribute, to discuss with us, to speak with us. I perceive it's not so easy in a digital format where you as a person might not be so visible despite the speakers, where discussions are moderated. So thank you particularly for the attendees for your motivation still to contribute, to stay on board, to listen, and to have some questions. What I want to summarize a little bit is what are the key needs that we try to learn from this conference. And this is one, particularly biodiversity, climate change should always come as a tendency. We need to consider the social ecological transformation in this concern as a key challenge for our century, for our millennium. And we have to try to capture how we can better address the question of co-design and co-development. Transformative research was often mentioned, and we miss concepts. How transformative research can really be realized in terms of projects that might not meet the typical project aspect that we have financed by ministries, but that might have a much longer view, like the real labs. How can we include this sustainably into our research? And what I learned also from this conference is that we speak about a new nexus, or more about a polygon. Biodiversity and climate change has to be set up in the context to food, water, and energy requests globally and regionally and locally. And we have to deal with policies, regulations, geopolitical conflicts, and also trade, how to manage somehow a balance. What I also learned is the question of space and scales. We learned it in one session before, this land sparing, land sharing, that there is a need to combine both. 30% of reservation, 70% of integrated management, and this demands definitively new concepts about food water and energy security, because we learned that integrated management might not have the same productivity than intensive management. Scales, and here I want to address only one aspect. Scales are not only spatial scales. Scales are particularly temporal scales when it comes to these important questions of intergenerational equity, agreements, dignity, and also the question of risks for now and in the future. These are the key lessons that I learned, and now I want to overhand to you, dear Holger, to continue.
Thank you, Christine, and I can fully support your applause for all the people that attended this meeting and all the people that contributed to this meeting by asking questions, by presenting information, ideas, concepts, sharing all this with us here. To me, it was really fascinating, and I would like to summarize a bit my lessons learned and their impact for the future development of FEdA, the research initiative for conservation of biodiversity. Let me first emphasize briefly what FEdA is about. So it's a research initiative in Germany, the largest biodiversity research initiative in Germany, with the obligation to find system solutions, how we can reverse biodiversity loss. Really ambitious. And so my first learning from this meeting is in some respect an answer to Marion's question: what kind of change do we need? Is it an incremental change of our institutions and processes, or do we need a paradigm shift? For me, it's pretty clear. If we want to reverse biodiversity loss, we need a systemic change, because as you were mentioning, Christine, biodiversity is linked with everything. So if you really want to change it, so you need a systemic shift. And I would remind you of a famous saying, I think it's from Albert Einstein: the concepts, ideas, and processes that led to a specific problem are not ideal to solve the problem. So if you want to solve a problem that was generated by a certain concept, try to use another concept if you want to solve the problem, right? So, and I think this applies here. Now, more specifically, let me tell you what I think are the consequences for FEdA and its future. So we have addressed in this meeting a number of different general topics related to biodiversity loss and how we can reverse this trend. We started yesterday with a focus on valuation, and I think in this respect, FEdA has done already a lot of work, because we have also seen a lot of contributions from FEdA. So I think we had a major call with a number of projects that were focusing on valuation. So I think this is a topic which we so far had already on the radar. And of course, there's still a lot of work to do, but I think this is already well placed in FEdA. This is different when it comes to the second and third meeting or session or forum. The second one was focusing on environmental justice and teleconnections. This is, in some respects, a black area in our FEdA research program, the teleconnections and the topic of environmental justice. And I think this is certainly something we have to address in the future. I will later tell you how we can think about how we can do this. And this is also true when it comes to concepts, how we can moderate conflicts. I mean, in several presentations, we were talking about conflicts, and this is obviously the major problem. I mean, if we wouldn't have problems, we could easily solve the problem because, or easily, more or less easily solve the problem. But the issue really is that wherever we try to change something, there are conflicts, and how to moderate conflicts. I think this is really a big issue. When it comes to successful practices, we have seen a number of good examples where it works. We have also seen some examples where it didn't work very properly. I particularly refer to one of the presentation of Matthias Schündel this afternoon. And I think this is also well covered. This topic is also well covered in FEdA so far. And this is a bit different when it comes to all the transformation processes and the perspective to the future. I think this is also something where we could do more in the future. So from my perspective of FEdA, I see that some of the aspects we have dealt with these 2 days actually were well covered. And there are a number of very important issues that we should address more in the future. So how we can do that? At the moment, we have still three active calls. One is biodiversity and valuation, another is biodiversity and health, and the third one is biodiversity and AI. These are the three calls that are still active. Biodiversity and valuation of biodiversity is closing in the near future. So primarily there will be two very active project calls: biodiversity and health, biodiversity and AI. And I think within this framework, we can really try to address the open questions that I mentioned before: environmental justice, teleconnections, transformative change, these topics, with workshops focusing on these topics and bringing together the stakeholders, the experts from these various fields. And if you are interested in these follow-ups, please look at our homepage. Whatever we do, you will find it on our homepage. You will have a newsletter. If you are interested in joining one of the workshops we are then planning, you are welcome to join us. I really loved in this meeting the very broad disciplinary approaches that all were focusing on a systemic understanding. So this was really great during this meeting. So what would be the follow-up for you? I think within a few days, you will find the recordings of this meeting on the platform. The conference platform will be still open for about 3 to 4 weeks, where you can find the recording of this meeting within a couple of days, I guess. Of course, we will not show these presentations of the authors that said they don't like it for several reasons. This is, of course, very clear, and we accept this, of course. After 4 weeks, I think we will transfer the recordings to YouTube, and so that you can see the information or get the information from this meeting for a longer time by looking at YouTube. Finally, I think we will contact you also to ask you for some key messages learned. Following the various presentations and discussions, I observed so many interesting key statements where I think this would be good to keep them as a memory, where everyone can look at some key statements from the various persons. I think this could be interesting for many different people, for yourself, just to see what all the different people in this conference have contributed. Just the key lessons that you learned, 1 or 2 sentences, not more. But I think it could also be interesting for decision makers, policymakers, just to, and also funding institutions, to learn what we as a group think should be done in the near future, or what are important lessons. So I think this topic of key messages from all of you would be a topic we would like to ask you to contribute. What would be your contribution? And last but not least, I would love if you could give us a feedback, what you felt about this conference, what did you miss, what was good, what was bad, what should we change for the next period. We need your contribution, your feedback, actually, to improve our system for the next meeting. And that's about all I'm going to say. once more, many, many thanks. It was really inspiring. A very ambitious program, very ambitious presentations, discussions. So it really helped us a lot, and it left us with a lot, of new questions and topics we have to address. Thanks a lot, and I don't need to say have a safe trip back home, because I guess you're out already at home, but I look forward to see you again at another meeting, be it within FEdA or within another meeting concept. Thanks a lot, and many, many thanks to all the people that actually organized this meeting. This is the team at FEdA, Julian and his group, and of course, the Lindman group. They again did a great job to organize everything. Many, many thanks to all, and see you soon, hopefully. Bye-bye.